Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. We are about to start. My name is Andrejs Pildagovic. I'm State Secretary from the Latvian Foreign Ministry, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you for this conference dedicated to the media in Eastern Partnership countries. I am delighted to chair this very distinguished panel. We have a number of prominent speakers, voices for freedom, for values and rights of journalists. I have to confess that this conference is a joint project of the Latvian Presidency, of the European Commission, External Action Service, European Endowment of Democracy, and a few other like-minded NGOs. In some respects, this is an experiment. We are convening this media forum for the first time on the sidelines of the Eastern Partnership Summit. Our goal is to enlarge the network of friends, stakeholders of the partnership. Eastern Partnership will succeed if it will grow bigger than just governmental enterprise and governmental project. And of course, media is playing an extremely important, crucial role in the development of our common project. We are very much looking forward to your suggestions, recommendations at the end of the summit, and we'll try to use them at the end of the week during the gathering of the heads of states and the governments. Without further ado, I invite you to use social media. The information about social media is available to you. The translation is available. We'll have 3 extraordinary panels in the course of the day. Commissioner Hahn will make a concluding speech, and then a colleague of mine, Ambassador Stipres, will make a wrap-up on the recommendations and conclusions of the conference. Without further ado, I would like to present to you a former colleague of yours and now the Speaker of the Latvian Parliament, Mrs. Ināra Mūrniece. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Pildagovic. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, good morning to everyone, and welcome to Riga. Welcome to the conference, Role of Media in Eastern Partnership. I'm particularly glad to greet you on behalf of the Latvian Presidency, both as a Speaker of Latvian Parliament and as someone who has been a journalist for almost 16 years and is still very much one, at heart and at mind. We journalists, we know the challenges to our craft in the post-Soviet world. We know the price of our efforts to safeguard the independence of our reporters and editors. A career in journalism is very often a calling. It does not always pay well, but requires courage and personal sacrifice. Today's conference is organized by the Latvian Presidency of the Council of the European Union, together with the EU institutions. It has gathered the finest selection of the greatest media experts and professionals. The list of participants is impressive, and I want to thank every one of you for responding and agreeing to contribute to our joint discussion. Thank you for your time, interest, and expertise, which you are ready to share with us. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the European Commission and the External Action Service for fruitful cooperation in preparing the conference, and particularly the media subgroup of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum and advisory group of the conference for being together with the Presidency since the very inception of the idea to hold the first Eastern Partnership Media Conference. This conference represents a new initiative launched by our Presidency. It is an important element in the context of the upcoming Riga Eastern Partnership Summit. It shows the importance of free media to sustain the values, goals, and ideals of the Eastern Partnership. Freedom of the press and freedom of expression are cornerstones of democratic, free, and self-confident society, which in turn needs corresponding media, equally free-speaking, professional and powerful. Dear colleagues, since the Eastern Partnership was established in 2009, dramatic challenges have emerged in the region. The issue of media pluralism in the current geopolitical situation is closely linked with the threatening situation caused by Russia in eastern Ukraine. In a perfect world, the media would be mentioned exclusively with reference to freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and freedom of speech, as well as in the context of some technical aspects of free media market and ways to perfect broadcasting. As a former journalist, I would prefer to discuss ways how to refine free democratic media. But however, we do not live in a perfect world. Moreover, the geopolitical development shows that reality threatens both the content and technical operation of media. Media tools and media operation, including democratic media instruments and legislation, are sometimes abused. The result in this case is bias and propaganda, which undermines democracy and political accountability. It is even more important in the current situation when we face invasion into our information space and pressures from Kremlin's propaganda. In this regard, I would like to refer to a remark on the Baltics made by Martin Lindegaard, Danish Minister for Foreign Affairs, who said, "You have massive propaganda, provocations, stimulation of groups inside other countries, which is not warfare, but which is very hostile and close to warfare." In this hostile information environment, courageous and free media content is crucial. This brings us to the issue of strengthening the resilience of the media community and general public to the pressure of disinformation. A need to improve critical thinking and media literacy is becoming prerequisite, and we need to address this issue constantly. Therefore, the timing of the conference is appropriate and our meeting is very much needed. Dear colleagues, the agenda of the conference is an inspiring platform for sharing your expertise and experience with regard to current challenges to media freedom in the Eastern Partnership countries. I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas on ways to facilitate implementation of the Eastern Partnership visibility strategy, or in more general terms, communication with the Eastern Partnership countries and EU citizens. I am aware that this conference will provide valuable input to the summit and its declaration. I wish you all success, creative energy, and new ideas. And may you have a wonderful time in Riga. Thank you for your attention.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for your very strong message and continuous support to media. The next speaker is Mr. Christian Danielsson, Director General of Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations, as we call in diplomatic language, DG NEAR of the European Commission. Please.
Thank you very much. President, Madam Speaker, State Secretary, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Every democratic society, every democratic transformation is built on freedom of expression and the free media. They are fundamental to the choices that citizens make about the future of the country. And without them, the public cannot weigh up options to judge their leaders. And without them, dangerous misperceptions take root. This is why I would like to commend the Latvian presidency for having organized today's event. It is important to help support, reinforce and develop a free, reliable and resilient media in the Eastern Partnership countries. This is an essential element of the Eastern Partnership's state-building process. And when it comes to freedom of expression and freedom of the media, the European standards are clear. They are set by the Council of Europe. They are difficult, and they need to be cherished every day, continuously. We know in the European Union how difficult that is, but we are committed to support the partners in working with the partners in order to address this issue. It is more important than ever for people to have access to a variety of objective, good quality and independent information. This is true everywhere, and perhaps even more important for the Eastern Partnership countries. Today's conference is going to address a number of interesting issues. If you allow me, let me mention three that I will be particularly interested to follow. The first one has to do with the rather difficult economic situation for traditional media. This has partly been the effect of the economic crisis, but also to the change of the media landscape. It leads to vulnerability, it leads to dependence, and it leads to risks for the resilience and for the objectivity of the information. This can be through the interference of the public sector, of the governments, but it can also be the effect of a dominant owner. And that is an issue that needs to be discussed. That is an issue that needs to be addressed. The second issue has to do with globalization. We are in the information space, and this offers incredible opportunities, but it also leads to challenges. The flowering of different forms of online and social media undoubtedly contributes to democracy and to citizens' opportunity to get access to information. This is particularly true in countries where the absence of free media and unavailability of reliable information in the mainstream media is a reality. However, not all sources can be read with the same degree of trust. And this is why we must continue to reflect on this issue, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today, and also support professional journalism and the training of journalists. The third issue is one that also was mentioned by you, Madam Speaker, and that is the rather hostile climate when it comes to a certain part of the information that we have seen over the last couple of years. State-sponsored disinformation, coming in particular from Russia, which puts a substantive challenge for Eastern Partnership countries in particular. It exploits the weaknesses and gaps in the media landscape in the partner countries, but also in the European Union. So one task of the conference today, I would say, is to discuss that issue and to perhaps also point in the direction how this important challenge can be met. Governments have responsibilities with regard to the overall media environment. That is clear. They need to guarantee a safe environment where different opinions can be expressed. They should also ensure that all citizens have access to factual and objective information, and they need to ensure that rules on competition and transparency of media exist and are upheld. Civil society and you, media representatives, meanwhile, have a responsibility to hold the governments to account. This is an essential part of the checks and balances in any democratic society. For our part, from the European Commission, we are engaged, and we will deepen our engagement in this sector. We are already working with our Eastern Partnership countries, partners, both at the political level and through technical and financial assistance. We will promote freedom of expression and independence of the media, including online media. We will support media pluralism and ethnic journalism. We are also working with professional associations to improve media professionalism and journalist training. And most fundamentally, we are providing support for journalists' human rights. Mr. Speaker, President, State Secretary, let me finally conclude that the transition of the Eastern Partnership countries is in all our interest. Freedom of expression and the free media are integral part of this process, and all of us here today have our own roles in defending and promoting these freedoms. The discussion which you have today will go a long way to determine how best to achieve this. I'm confident. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Danielsson, for your message, strong message, and continuous support to this conference. Without your support, this conference wouldn't have been possible, indeed. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to another distinguished Latvian Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe, Mr. Nils Muiznieks. Don't confuse, Council of Europe is not European Council. This is another organization based in Strasbourg, but very much like-minded with what we are doing right now. And on a little bit Latvian personal note, we very much hope that all Eastern Partnership countries, sooner than later, and I mean Belarus, will join Council of Europe. Mr. Muiznieks, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, Madam President, Madam Speaker, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be in Riga and see so many friends, to share the podium with such distinguished speakers, and to address you on a topic of such importance. As Commissioner for Human Rights, I have to address the whole range of human rights issues, but I must say that freedom of expression and media freedom in particular are absolutely essential in my work and absolutely essential for the protection of other human rights. Where large parliamentary majorities exist and other checks and balances have been weakened, media, together with NGOs, sometimes are the sole remaining check that can make governments accountable. Media freedom is also a precondition for the exercise of other rights. Freedom of association, freedom of assembly, free elections are unthinkable without media freedom. Media freedom is also key in exposing all kinds of human rights abuses, discrimination, and the situation of the most vulnerable. So to me, media freedom is a key to the exercise of all other human rights and to democracy. In the 3 years that I've been Commissioner for Human Rights, I've visited all of the Eastern Partnership countries except for Belarus. And as the State Secretary said, I hope to be able to visit Belarus soon as a full member of the Council of Europe. Just about 2-3 weeks ago, I presented my annual report to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and my motto was that 2014 was a bad year for human rights, and 2015 is looking to be even worse. And I would say that 2014 and 2015 have been a bad year for media freedom in a number of Eastern Partnership countries. Safety of journalists has been a concern since the very beginning of last year, especially in Ukraine, starting with the Euromaidan. I visited Ukraine in February of last year, the first of many visits in the midst of Maidan, and I met many journalists who had been injured and threatened during the protests. Over 100 journalists were attacked during the protests, some by stun grenades, others by rubber bullets. We still await justice for Vyacheslav Veremyi, the journalist of the Vesti newspaper who was shot dead on 18th of February. Attacks against journalists continued and escalated as a conflict in the East grew in the context not only of the conflict in the East in Donbass, but also in Crimea. The recent killing of Oles Buzina is a stark reminder of the dangers journalists face in the region. While most of the attention recently has been on Donbass and on the East, I have tried to remind the world of the situation in Crimea, which is of grave concern to me. I was able to visit Crimea in September, and I met with many journalists. And the situation has deteriorated since my visit, with the closing in particular of ATR, Crimean Tatar ATR TV. This, unfortunately, was not a surprise. When I met with them, they were receiving warnings, they were being searched, and the signs were clear that they were going to be in trouble. I met others as well, and since then the news has been bad. We've had questioning of journalists, searches, journalists forced to leave their profession. This is unacceptable, and it has to stop. Today, 7 years after the 2008 Georgia conflict, notions of information security and propaganda have resurfaced with a vengeance in all Eastern Partnership countries. The media have been the first victims of political tensions and conflicts, and the risk is that they turn into propaganda tools. Restrictions on rebroadcasting, the banning of journalists from entry into a country, biased reporting, and the neglect of journalistic ethics risk turning media into pawns in a bigger geopolitical game. I understand the concerns mentioned. I understand you had a big discussion about this yesterday as well. But in my view, the answer to propaganda is not counter-propaganda, but media freedom, media pluralism, and ethical journalism. One of the most worrying trends from my perspective is what's going on in Azerbaijan. There's a clear pattern of repression against human rights defenders, independent journalists, bloggers, and other critical voices. I recently noted that almost all my partners in Azerbaijan are in jail now. This is unacceptable in a Council of Europe country. I've used my power to intervene before the European Court of Human Rights as a third party in 5 cases regarding human rights defenders and journalists from Azerbaijan. One of the cases concerns Hilal Mamedov, the editor of Talishi Sado. He was imprisoned on a very unlikely combination of charges related to drugs, treason, and incitement. When I met him together with Dunja Mijatovic, he said, this is very interesting. How can I be a spy, a drug dealer, and a revolutionary at the same time? This stretches credibility, do you not think? And I tried to raise his case with the authorities, but he's still in prison. In the rest of the region, the primary concerns, I think, have to do with transparency of media ownership, insufficient media pluralism. This is a case, I think, in Georgia and Armenia and Moldova, to a lesser extent. In Georgia, during a country visit, I saw the disconnect of minority regions, those inhabited by Azerbaijani and Armenian minorities, from the national media scene. I remember asking the authorities, do you really want your minorities to receive all of their information about Europe, about the European Union, about NATO, from Russia? Because if you do not address them, this is where they will get their information from. We dealt with a similar challenge in Latvia, and we did not succeed very well. And we're still trying to heal that mistake. In Georgia, not only in Armenia, in addition to media pluralism, my predecessor addressed the issue of A1 Plus TV, and I understand one of the journalists from that media is here. I received reports about the lack of pluralism, about opaque ownership in Armenian media, and a lot of concern among journalists about the digital switchover and what this will mean for media pluralism. I also received a lot of reports of online threats against various activists dealing with sensitive issues such as gender equality or LGBT issues. In Moldova, the media situation evokes less concern than in other countries. Although I have heard worrying reports about changes proposed to the audiovisual code and to law on freedom of expression. In late March, I understand there was a big controversy, and there were a lot of concerns were raised by media and NGOs about proposed content restrictions. The reaction to this from civil society and the media seems to have led to the dropping of these proposals. It's clear that journalists have an important role themselves in improving self-regulation, in working on professional ethics, and working on responsible reporting. But the primary responsibility, of course, lies with governments to foster media pluralism, to remove undue restrictions, and to resist bad practices. Now, the bad practices that I see as spreading most readily across the region are bad and broadly worded anti-extremism laws, anti-homosexual propaganda laws, blocking websites without judicial authorization, and harassing journalists who are critical or have minority opinions. Now, the media will continue to play a key role in consolidating democracy throughout the region. And I think it will be a key indicator for the European integration process, the strength of the commitment of the governments to democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. The Council of Europe as a whole stands ready to assist all of the countries of the region. We recently launched an internet platform for the safety of journalists. I hope you will use this if you are threatened or get into trouble. I hope that you will quickly put your information on the internet platform so that we can react properly. And I remain at your disposal if you are threatened, intimidated, harassed, attacked, or if you see bad legislation coming into the pipeline. Please let my office know, and I will try to make as much noise as I can from Strasbourg. Thank you for your attention.
Commissioner Muznieks, thank you so much for speaking the truth and for your tireless efforts to safeguard the values of the Council of Europe. Thank you for your presence today. And now I am pleased to pass the floor to Mrs. Dunja Mijatovic, OAC representative on media, on freedom of the media. Please, Madam.
I have your mic. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear journalists, civil society members, dear friends, I'm honored to be here. It's wonderful to be back to Riga, and I thank you very much for inviting me to take part at this first media conference, which I think is extremely important, and just the fact that you decided to have it before the summit on Eastern Partnership is already a sign that we need to take things in relation to media freedom and safety of journalists seriously. We are asked here to look into the future to determine if even in the distant future the media environment in the Eastern Partnership countries will be such that a move to the European Union is warranted or deserved. Not an easy task. As it stands now, that future does not look promising at all. And I will not, as usual, try to sugarcoat and to please the governments of Eastern Partnership or any other governments that are not complying and honouring the commitments, resolutions, and all these wonderful documents that look wonderful only on paper. In the most recent Freedom House survey on press freedom, media in 3 of the 6 Eastern Partnership countries were considered not free: Belarus, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. The other 3 are only partly free, including Moldova, which now has an association agreement with the EU. Of course, it would be very unfair and frankly wrong to paint all countries with a single brush. For one thing, a country such as Ukraine, where people experience violence, aggression, people are being killed, annexation of Crimea, and everything that is happening there, it shows that they have much more difficult path to travel because of the actual circumstances on the ground there. It is facing the direct and ugly effects of propaganda floating through its airwaves. But all this is not an excuse for the government to make wrong steps when it comes to media freedom. Nils Muiznieks just mentioned an issue of impunity and attacks and threats and killing of journalists not being investigated in Ukraine. The time that is given to me, of course, is not enough to begin the chronicle of endemic abuses of power that I have seen in some of these countries over the past 5 and almost a half years in this job. Make no mistake about it. Media freedom is basic right, and we are dealing with governments that commit wholesale violations of the right for people to engage in free media. Just consider this. Why is Radio Liberty reporter Hatija Ismailova sitting in Azerbaijani jail? Why is Emil Husseinov sitting in the Swiss embassy in Baku and not being able to go out? He has been a target of abuse for years, and just earlier this month the European Court of Human Rights, as Nils mentioned, finding in his favour in an abuse case that stems from 2008 incident. Rasul Yafarov. Why are journalists in Belarus routinely arrested, jailed and fined for simply reporting on issues on behalf of foreign news media. And please consider the big picture question. Why do we all think that anything will really change, and when it is going to change? What needs to be done? I think we need to call things the way they are. We should not try to address these issues through Eastern Partnership or association agreements or any kind of cooperation. There is no cooperation with the countries that are abusing human rights. As we speak, there are people sitting in prison, people arrested, threatened, their families threatened, harassed, murders not being investigated. This is the reality, not just, of course, in Eastern Partnership countries and not in all Eastern Partnership countries. But I make a note at the beginning that we cannot use the same brush to paint the picture. But the picture is not rosy at all. And it's based on facts. It's not based just on my assessment or Nils Muzhnik's assessment. We do travel, we meet people, and many of these people are sitting here. I also went to Crimea, and I realized that in less than 2 weeks, all TV stations originating from Ukraine were switched off and replaced with the Russian channels originating from Russian Federation. There is no print media, Ukrainian print media there any longer. Journalists are harassed, intimidated, and they, in a way, leave the country and they try to work in other parts of Ukraine. So all this is the way we see the situation, and we try to address all these issues. While we are here to talk about media freedom in Eastern Partnership countries, the same question can be raised in the nations that were not part of the former Soviet Union, including the Balkans, where I come from. There is a litany of issues that my office considers when reporting on the media environment in participating states of the OSCE, and there are 57, as you know. Among them are the ways journalists are treated or mistreated when trying to do their job, whether they can be thrown in jail on trumped-up charges related to media or simply made up. Who is in charge of public service television, the ability to get information on governments, activities, and equally important, the ability to talk to sources, including government employees, in confidence. Few countries have a spotless record on media freedom issues. The current fascination with anti-terrorism legislation in many EU countries has many, and also seriously considering laws that on their face are troubling. But this is no time for the EU to have crisis of confidence over imperfections in the media environment in their own countries. Some of these Eastern Partnership nations are really serious about becoming members of the EU. So now is the time, clearly the best time in my view, to do some straight talking on media freedom when the EU holds all the cards in the game in a way. And I think that has to happen during the summit, where all leaders of Eastern Partnership countries are there. Too many countries simply deny the clear fact that they have problems related to media freedom and freedom of expression. I still hear from many leaders, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Eastern Partnership countries, that such problems do not exist in their countries at all, that everything is fine, and there is a plurality, and all these people in prison are just criminals. I strongly disagree. One of the issues before us today is how the EU will get the attention of those countries that are still in denial about their media environment and get them to move toward policies that will lead to EU accession. If it is not done now, later it is going to be too late, in my view. Next week, I will attend a very important event at the UN with the Latvian and Lithuanian foreign ministers talking about safety of journalists. I'm honored to have this opportunity again to be the voice of all people that are not able to do their jobs or to do journalism in their countries. And I can assure you that I will use it in order to address the issues of concern in all of your countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mijatovic, for your strong message. and for the support of OSCE to this conference and to our ongoing actions. And now I have a great privilege to introduce to you one of our special speakers for this conference, former President of the Republic of Latvia, Dr. Vaigravītis Freiberga, who is currently taking position of the President of the Club de Madrid and has worked as well as the chair of the high-level group on freedom of pluralism of the media in the European Union. Madam President, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. I'll try to take a general overview of journalism, such as it applies to our Eastern partners, but to ourselves as well. The European Union generally has been a beacon of justice, of peace, of reconciliation, leading to prosperity, and as such has been an attracting light to the countries who, like moths, have flocked to its bodies, international bodies and organizations, by the force of attraction, this magnetic force of attraction, which is a success of the countries which since the Schuman Declaration, step by step, slowly have become the European Union and the standards that it has established. The idea is that the European Union should be a shining example to the rest of the world, and that our soft power should be expressed in our ability to show how it can be done and how it can be done better. I think we are justified in a great many ways to take that attitude. At the same time, I think we should not forget about reminding ourselves that some modesty towards our own performance also would not be misplaced. What are media about? The word itself already says they are communicators from a source A to a source B. When Shannon invented information theory, he was concerned with telecommunications, how information is transmitted from one telephone through another through a copper wire. Nowadays, the media are still an intermediary between events on the ground, the reality in all its buzzing, blooming, confusion and its multiplicity and diversity, and the reader who always has a limited attention span, who has limited time to take in this information, and the media serve then as that filter between reality, as you might say, and the reader or watcher or listener as the recipient of that information. As such, it plays an absolutely crucial and essential role in democratic societies and their governance. There's no way you can have a democracy if citizens are not properly informed about what is going on in their country, if they do not hear a variety of opinions expressed on questions that at the time are undecided, where different sectors of society may have conflicting interests, and where a compromise or a solution needs to be sought to avoid violence and to avoid violent confrontation. That means that the media play a crucial role in maintaining peace in the world, actually, because it is much better for people to know what the other side thinks, what their arguments are, and possibly then engage in a dialogue, be it at the political level or at the level of non-governmental organizations. The media, thus, in one word, could be said to be a basic pillar of democracy, just as important in my eyes as the political system, and the legal system, by the way, which is also a crucial aspect of democracy. What we have just heard this morning reminds us that the countries that this summit in Riga is engaging a dialogue with do have problems with media freedom as compared to those that we encounter in our own countries. But I'd like to remind you that we, within the European Union, are not exactly lily white and snow white in our own performance. Why? First of all, media must be free of political interference, but the political process should be free of business interference. In a country that is clearly run by oligarchs, obviously this is going to have an effect, because why? Media are also a business proposition. Media can only function if they work as business propositions. And that means that, be it the written media or the new technologies, the cost of producing news and distributing it plays an important role in the kind of information and the quality of information that is available to the citizen. And what we have found in our committee when we looked at media freedom and diversity in Europe were some alarming signs which are potentially dangerous, at least for Europe, and that also Europe itself should do a bit of navel-gazing once in a while to make sure that it remains a shining example as far as the media go for the rest of the world. One example, in one particular country, all the print media are owned by the same business concern, every single one of them. And when we inquired to the owners association, media owners of Europe, the answer we got about that country was that, well, the owners do own all the newspapers. However, they allow the editors and the journalists complete editorial freedom. If this is so, they say, there shouldn't be no problem, and it shouldn't make any difference who owns the outlet. But just imagine, should there be a situation, should there arise a situation where the interests of the owners are in some way or another threatened? Can we truly count on this medium becoming and remaining a truly objective, neutral, unbiased reporter of the facts on the ground? While everything is going well, a concern can own left-wing, center, and right-wing newspapers and claim to give them complete freedom. Potentially, our committee thought that there was a potential danger there, and that diversity in ownership of media, as well as diversity of editorial policies, which is part of the freedom of speech and expression, has a role to play. Second part of the business side of things is that the new platforms of distribution have had a serious impact on the quality of the profession of journalists in terms of their ability to get proper training, to get proper experience, to go through an apprenticeship as usually had been done before they become well-known names with, say, their daily columns in world-famous newspapers. And what is happening nowadays, some of the journalist association representatives were complaining that in Denmark, for instance, there are something like 1,500 journalists, if I'm not mistaken about the figure. Let's say a sufficiently large number of journalists in that country who are employed by newspapers, but that Google takes the news content that they produce and has only 6 journalists employed by it, and is the one that makes the biggest profits, and that the production of content and the professional qualifications of journalists are being threatened, and also the job security of journalists. increasingly media outlets will have contracts, simple contracts, short-term contracts with journalists, rather than being employed as a permanent job, say as being editor or journalist for certain types of topics. And then finally, we mustn't remember the fact that journalism is also, or the media as a whole, have another role to play, which is very significant. And it, of course, has a lot to do also with the economic side of things, and that is entertainment. And we know that in democratic countries, a large mass of the media space is taken up by entertainment. If you have had occasion to see the movie The Men in Black, it has actually, I think, several series. The Men in Black are really a takeoff on some American tabloids, which especially the National Enquirer, which are available in grocery stores, so that every time you buy some milk or bread and eggs, as you pass the cash register, you see these huge black headlines, woman kidnapped by aliens and made impregnated by alien invaders, and things of that nature. And the public absolutely loves these things. They sell like hotcakes, and they're a significant source of revenue to many media concerns. The Men in Black, the joke in that film was that everything you ever read in the National Enquirer is absolutely true, and that they're the ones who are revealing the truth. And the official newspapers and government press releases and so on, they're the ones who are lying and who are covering up. We have aliens everywhere. Maybe among you, somebody innocent looking is sitting there. But really, you know, if they threw off their mask, they'd have horns sprouting or something like that. Well, that too is a problem in a democratic society, because according to statistics, the intelligence of the general public is distributed according to a bell curve. In other words, 50% of the people are of average intelligence, 25% are above intelligence, and 25% below. The kind of media that appeal to, let us say, the less intellectually gifted among the population can become very serious tools of propaganda. And mind you, highly intellectual academics can be as easily misled by propaganda. And I could, if we had time, I could quote you examples from, say, French intellectuals of the 20s and 30s, of whom half were admiring Stalin, the other half were admiring Hitler. So that just shows you that intelligence is not the only criterion. Common sense has its role to play as well. And the dangers, therefore, to democracy, if you like, are multiple. They come from everywhere. There are challenges to be answered. Our recommendation was, for instance, that the public should be taught how to read newspapers and how to interpret media. Journalists should be assured of getting professional qualifications and good training. Their professional career prospects and their ability to survive as journalists economically should be better assured. But it goes without saying, and I'm not repeating what my colleagues here at this table have emphasized, it is obvious that in countries where journalists are arrested on false charges, where they're actually murdered on the street by unknown persons who are never called to justice, or by executioners who are not the real responsible ones who took the decision to get rid of a certain person. Journalism is an extremely dangerous profession to be in, precisely because of the role it plays in society. The more important and the better a journalist in reporting things that might be unpleasant to somebody, the more their life is in danger and the more their career is in danger. And I think that what we have heard this morning about that needing to be a serious concern internationally, and for Europeans to play a serious role, at least with those with whom they wish to have closer contacts, both economic and otherwise, to absolutely insist on the fundamental importance of protecting the lives and the freedom of expression of journalists. But the other side of the coin is that journalists also should always maintain certain ethical standards, and that the blurred line between what is reporting and journalistic style and what is literary fantasy and fiction is not always clear in publications. As I say, there are some publications which by their very headlines announce loudly that they are biased and they want to attract your attention. But when we think about the Leveson inquiry and its results in Great Britain and Mr. Murdoch's concerns, Mr. Murdoch actually boasted that he had put in office his newspapers and his media had been instrumental in putting in office the last 3 prime ministers, who are not all from the same party. This is very serious business. We think of Great Britain as an absolutely shining example of freedom of the press and of democracy, and of well-established, historically established democracy. The Leveson inquiry is a scary piece of reporting. Well, believe you me, it's sometimes unpleasant to read, but it's very instructive. So Europe as well has to look after the plurality of its media, the freedom of its media, the professionalism of its media. But yes, we do have, I think, all of us as human beings, and not just those interested in the media, we should be concerned about those who are unjustly jailed, those whose murders go unpunished or uninvestigated, because without information that is as clear, as objective, as professional, as diverse as it can possibly get, democracy falters. The freedom of the press is inextricably linked to the quality of democracy. It's the litmus test of democracy. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I would remind you all that you carry a heavy responsibility on your shoulders, all of you as professionals or as non-governmental organizations, to see that the media do fulfill that role to the benefit of citizens worldwide, in your country and elsewhere. Thank you.
Madam President, thank you so much for those illuminating remarks and for helping us to set up the tone for today's discussions and deliberations. I want to thank all speakers on this panel for very strong messages, and without further ado, I would invite the members of the first opening panel on the media environment in Eastern Partnership countries. Thank you so much, and we very much wish you very successful discussions today. Thank you.